Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for volunteering to judge this year's Minnesota FFA Parliamentary Procedure Leadership Development event. My name is Joe Ramsted. I'll be assisting with the event this year, and we couldn't be more excited to have you on board. So the purpose of this brief orientation is to provide you with an overview of how the event flow is going to work for the year, and answer some questions that you may have. And rest assured that when we come together here in a couple of weeks, we'll have an opportunity to review the abilities for the day together for your round, and make sure that we're all on the same page for how the day is going to work. So, brief overview of what we'll be covering today. So, we'll talk through the event flow. For those that are returners, this will be a review of information. For those of us that are new, this will kind of get you set up for what to expect when you help us out at the State Leadership Conference. We'll go through the three judging roles. So there'll be three judges in the room that will be assisting with helping evaluate and give feedback to our teams. So Judge 1 looks at opening ceremonies and the overall team effect. Judge 2 is looking at the correctness and parliamentary abilities. And Judge 3 is going to be looking at our discussion and debate. We'll go over some items to watch for as you look holistically at the team presentations. And then we'll share some next steps, and I'll provide my contact information if you'd like to get in touch with me before the event. So the event flow, this year, obviously it's new. We're having the event in December at the State Leadership Conference, which is new. It was at the State FFA Convention in April in years past, but we're excited for this change and to allow our teams the opportunity to come together here in December. As I'm presenting, teams are preparing to write or take their exam and minutes practicum. So this is being done in advance at their local schools. And the scores that they receive on these exams and minutes practicums are going to be added together, and teams will be ranked from 1 to 18. And this will help our seeding process so that we're having a fair seeding for our first round here at the Leadership Conference. So for our preliminary round, we will have 18 teams this year, which shakes out to be 3 rooms of 6 teams in each. These, again, will be seeded based on the exam and practicum scores. Each student can earn up to 50 points on each of them. Each question is worth 2 points. We then take the average score of the team. So 100 points possible, 50 for the exam, 50 for the minutes practicum to seed these rooms. You all will then judge the presentations. We'll supply you with the exam scores, and we'll tabulate all of those together to just select the top 2 from each room to advance to the finals. So seeing that there are 3 rooms in the preliminary round and 2 teams advance, that gives us 6 teams in our finals room. And the finalists will be vying for the chance to represent Minnesota at the National FFA Convention here in October. And our top team will be the team to advance this fall. So the schematic over here on the right kind of shows each room will identify the top 2. Those will move to our finals, and then we will have our winner crowned at our awards program Monday evening. For those that have not judged before, the room will be set up similar to the fashion that we see in this diagram. So the president's going to be at the front of the room at a lectern or at some type of table. Teams are asked to provide their own gavels, although I will have a spare in case a team forgets and needs to borrow one. It's important that the room is set up like this because this is how the teams have been practicing. So from the judges table perspective, the secretary, vice president, and advisor should be on your right, and reporter, treasurer, and sentinel should be on your left. The timekeeper table, if we do have one, will be in front of the judges table. But in the past, generally, we've just kept the time clock, if you will, on the judges table. And you'll want to make sure that you know how to operate that before your first team comes in. The advisor is not a participating member. They are able to recite the part in the opening ceremony, but beyond that, they're in the room and able to watch their team, but they are not allowed to participate in debate or making motions or any of that nature. So the event flow continued. Before our teams enter, we're going to want to ensure that the following is at each student station. An abilities card with the correct motion highlighted. Each student will be assigned a specific ability, and that will be provided to you at the orientation in person. It is important that we are consistent from room to room. For instance, let's say that we have the motion to commit or refer on our ability card. The secretary should be getting commit or refer in all 3 preliminary rooms to make it a fair event. So each ability will be assigned to a specific officer in the room. And we'll want to make sure that that ability is placed and highlighted and marked very clearly in that room at the correct station marker. So more to come on that when we gather in a couple weeks. They'll have that abilities card with the correct motion and no other marks allowed, blank paper and a pencil. Teams will enter the room and go into their stations We are not scoring them on how they enter the room. They're simply going to their spots, and we'll begin with some announcements at the beginning by our lead judge. So ideally, this will be somebody who has a judge in the past. If not, that's okay. Essentially, what we're going to want to do is welcome the team and provide some instructions, including that they will have 1 minute to silently review the ability cards after instructions have been given. They are not to write anything on the abilities cards that are at their table, but they can write all over the blank paper if they would like. There is to be no signaling or verbal cues at any or nonverbal cues at any time during the 1 minute of planning or any time throughout the presentation. Teams will then begin with the opening ceremony immediately after the 1 minute has closed. The timer will begin at the conclusion of the opening ceremony. So after the chairman says, "I now declare this meeting duly open to the transaction of business or attention to any matters to properly be presented," that is when you as the judging team will begin your timing. Teams will have up to 11 minutes to demonstrate the parliamentary procedure. The timer should be visible to all members and the advisor. So have that in a part of the room where everyone can see it, and make sure that you test that out before the team walks in so you know how that timer will work. Again, teams are limited to 11 minutes to avoid penalties. Having the clock in the room, you don't have to have any signals or any sort when 11 minutes has passed. They should be able to monitor themselves how long that 11 minutes has been. There will be an assessment of 2 points deducted per second over 11 minutes. So if a team, let's say, goes 15 seconds over and their final time is 11 minutes and 15 seconds, they will lose 30 points off of their total score. During this time, each member is required to present their required ability that will be bolded and highlighted, an additional ability that is not on the card or already being presented by another team member, and 4 debates. There can be no more than 2 debates per debatable motion. Debates that are on undebatable or unallowed motions do not count. For example, let's say that the chair calls for debate on the subsidiary motion to lay on the table. Lay on the table is not debatable, so any debates that occur on that lay on the table will not count. Additionally, if a team were to go ahead and make up some really canned or scripted motion, a debate would not account on those if it's not provided on the card. Each judge will also have different items to look for during the demonstration, so you're not going to be responsible for looking at all of these things. We'll talk more about those here in a moment. At the conclusion of the demonstration, each team member will be assigned 1 question related to parliamentary procedure or general meeting management. Questions will almost always have 2 or 3 parts. The point values will be assigned to each part, and each team member may earn a maximum of 10 points, so 60 points for the whole team. Partial credit is allowed, but please be consistent and fair as you're assigning and awarding partial credit from team to team. Questions may or may not relate to their assigned abilities. It is a common misconception that the question does have to relate to the motion that they presented. It does not necessarily have to be the case. Judges can take turns asking the questions if desired, but Judge 2 is going to be the individual who is actively scoring the question answering. No other questions should be asked of the teams besides the ones that have been provided on the master sheet that I'll give you. An answer key with the assigned point values for each part of the question will also be provided to Judge 2. As teams wrap up, you'll want to thank them and remind them not to discuss their set near other teams. They can bring their scrap paper with them if they would like. We don't need to collect those necessarily as a judging team, but again, they should not be discussing their abilities or anything that happened right outside of the room. We don't want other teams to be able to hear what's going on. Teams are also very discouraged from shaking judges' hands as a way to prevent them looking at scorecards or making it an uncomfortable situation for our judging team. So we'll remind teams before they come in to avoid shaking the judges' hands. So scoring, essentially this year we're going to be trying out a electronic scorecard. If you've helped with conduct of chapter meetings in the past, I know that they've used a really nice Excel spreadsheet that they've generously given to us to kind of pilot this year with Parley. But what we're going to do is we're going to have all of you as judges complete paper scorecards. So I have them printed out. They're color coordinated. So each judge is going to have a specific color. And then you'll kind of tabulate all of your scores on this master sheet. And this will then be provided to one of us event chairs, and we'll enter everything in the computer to double check math and consistencies. You'll want to score during the presentation, and teams will see your written comments. These comments are very valued by teams and coaches, so please make sure to leave thorough comments. Like earning an 8 out of 10 on an ability doesn't tell a team anything. Earning an 8 out of 10 on an ability and then explaining, oh, you forgot to indicate why you were taking a recess or the length of the recess in your motion, that is more beneficial. So they want to be able to see those comments from the judge. Please make sure to complete your scores without consulting with the other judges in the room. Compile your scores onto this judging worksheet that I provided here. I'll kind of go over what the judging sheet looks like for the other three here in a moment. You can adjust the scores as you see fit throughout. So let's say that you were starting off to be too harsh or too nice in the beginning. You can adjust as needed. But again, I would encourage you to really be consistent and fair, and really take good notes if you're going to be doing this. You might consider starting judging everyone at a middle level points, so you have room on either end. If the next team blows you away and you gave everyone on the first team all perfect scores, it's going to be hard to account for those differences. All scores, again, will be entered into a spreadsheet to ensure accuracy of math. And the key here is that you are very consistent from team to team and not collaborating with the other judges on feedback. The first judge is, I would recommend to be someone, if you this is your first time judging parliamentary procedure, or you are not as comfortable with the parliamentary abilities or like keeping track of debates, this would be a good one for starters. So opening ceremonies will be judged by this individual. Opening ceremonies are not timed, so teams should not feel rushed to go through the opening ceremony. I do like to tell, when I was an ag teacher, I'd always tell my students, opening ceremonies are not simply an exercise in recitation. There should be some level of enthusiasm, hopefully, behind what they're saying, and conviction. They can use nonverbals. Now, we're not looking for some big national FFA officer retiring address kind of energy. Like, that's not needed. But it shouldn't just be a bland statement reciting from a book what the opening ceremonies are. They hopefully will have a little bit more conviction. So you're welcome to kind of evaluate that as you look at the teams. Each member can earn up to 20 points. We will have copies of the opening ceremonies from the FFA handbook available. They should be reciting it word for word. Discussion will also be looked at. So you're not scoring each individual debate, but as you're sitting there and listening to all the discussion and taking it in, you should be answering the questions of, did they sound convincing? Did their points make sense? Were they logical? Was it an efficient conversation? Were the points germane? Was the team repetitive, or were ideas that were being offered new or fresh? So the suggested scoring rubric is over to the left here. You can see excellent is 31 and above, good is 21 to 30, average is 11 to 20, and poor is 0 to 10. Generally speaking, when I have scored parliamentary procedure in the past and I've done the judge one role, I would tend to have scores around the 20s. Again, that allows you to go up or down as you see fit and reward the teams that are outstanding, as well, to kind of differentiate them a little bit. Conclusion is the next area you're going to look at. Who, when, who, what, where, when, why, and how should all be answered. So you might consider writing those criteria over into the comments box of who, what, where, when, why, and how. And as they're addressing them, kind of take note of those items and then give a score overall for how well they answer those questions. And finally, we have team voice. We can be looking at their verbal and their nonverbal skills. Were they convincing? Were they excited? Were they able to use proper grammar when they were speaking? Were they poised, professional? Well, how was their expression? So these are some of the things that we'll look at on team voice. So each of these criteria are worth 40 points. Our second judge is going to be the parliamentary nerd, as I like to call it. They're going to be the one analyzing the correctness of the abilities. So in the competition, as we mentioned, each student will be assigned one ability on their ability card. They will also be asked to demonstrate an additional bonus motion. The assigned ability is worth 20 points and the bonus motion is worth 10 points. So each member can earn up to 30 points for their parliamentary abilities total. So essentially, we will provide you the day of the event, or right before the round begins, what the assigned abilities are. They've already been created. The sets are sure to challenge the teams, but they are fair and they're going to be fun to watch. And I'm excited for you to have the opportunity to see these awesome FFA members demonstrate their parliamentary knowledge. The abilities do have Robert's Rules of Order. There's guidance on how the form should look. But teams have their own kind of flair and way of doing some of the different motions. So as long as they're not violating the rules of parliamentary law, I do ask that you set aside your personal preferences or opinions on how things should be done. The team is demonstrating it correctly and not violating the parliamentary rules. They should be earning the points. However, it's important to watch out for precedence issues. So they should not be applying, let's say, a postpone indefinitely to an amendment. So you're going to want to make sure that you have the table of motions, which will have hard copies for you as well, to make sure that they're not presenting motions out of order. With the chair, you're going to want to make sure that you're evaluating their presiding ability. So their ability to state motions in front of the assembly. So like it is moved and seconded that we have a FFA chapter party next Tuesday in the agriculture room. Is there any discussion? Right? So how are they putting the motion before the assembly? Are they conducting a vote? Are they conducting a counted vote on the motions that require a 2/3 vote? So some of those kind of characteristics, evaluating that is 80 points. And then their leadership ability. Are they able to be tactful and understanding? Are they able to be heard? Are they confident? Are they speaking at a proper pace? So you're going to be evaluating that out of 20 points as well. And lastly, we have the oral questions. Each team member will get one question that is worth up to 10 points for 60 points total. Finally, Judge 3. This individual is going to be scoring the top 4 debates per member. The president does not debate. The other 5 officers do debate. So generally speaking, most teams are going to come in and they're going to have exactly 4 debates. But let's say for some reason a team comes in and they want to do 5 or even 6 debates. You would score the top 4 that are done correctly. So for example, if a team member were to debate 2 times on the main motion, 2 times on an amendment, and 1 time on a refer, you will select the top 4 scores, and those will be the scores that count for that student. Now, let's say that the member debated 3 times on a main motion, and 1 time on an amendment, and 1 time on a refer. You would not be able to score that third debate on a main motion because you're not allowed to debate more than twice on a motion per day in the competition. When scoring debates are each worth 15 points. So generally how I've done it in the past is opening 1 or 3 points in the middle and closing. I would assign 3 points for each of those criteria. So if they had an opening that said something to the effect of, I'm in strong favor of this motion, or I'm strongly opposed to this motion, or I rise in agreement with this motion, something that's different and a way to indicate their stance is 3 points in the beginning. Then they'll have 3 points in the middle that hopefully are not repetitive of what others have said and are convincing and logical. And I would assign 3 points for each of those. And then their closing is another 3 points. So join me in voting yes, join me in voting no. Let's defeat this motion, get behind me and pass this motion. Something to that effect that is a call to action for the fellow assembly members and is convincing and indicates how they're going to vote should be that closing. So I will also say that if they have 2 really strong debates in the middle or 2 strong points in the middle, you can score that accordingly as well. So we're looking holistically at the debate and how it was. I often told my teams when I was teaching that I would much rather see 2 very strong non-repetitive points than 3 weak ones. So score as you see fit, just be consistent between team to team, and 15 points per debate. My average debate score when I'm scoring is generally around 7 or 8 or 9 out of 15, again, to give you wiggle room to really reward those top debate students. You'll always want to score against debates that are not germane. So if they're debating the main motion when we're on an amendment, that should not be scored highly. Debates that are canned, we'll talk more about this at the in-person orientation, but if it sounds like it's scripted and they're making references and quotes and things like that that don't sound natural for a high school student to be making, it's likely canned, and that'll want to be a discussion that you have with one of us before you are done scoring. Debates that lack structure, so if they don't have an opening, points, or a closing, score accordingly. Debates that are repetitive or don't add to the discussion should not be scored highly, and debates that are obviously out of order generally are not scored at all, which we talked about previously. Generally speaking, we also want to watch for a couple of things overall, whether you are judge 1, 2, or 3. Canned or unrealistic debate or motions that are happening, issues with precedent. So if we're making motions that are not in order, those debates that are applied should not be scored accordingly because the motion's out of order. Issues with form and motion correctness. So if a motion is not presented correctly, it should be scored as such by judge 2. Duplicate motions in the presentation. So let's say, for example, that point of order is demonstrated twice by a team. Only the one that was done, either if it was an assigned ability or done first, is the one that is scored. So we can talk more about that at the in-person orientation as well. There are 4 motions that are never allowed unless they are an assigned ability, and those are call for the orders of the day, reconsider, rescind, and take from the table. So if those motions are bolded and highlighted on an ability card, the team needs to demonstrate it, but this cannot be an additional motion if it's not designated on the card for that round. Voting and debate inconsistencies, what I mean by this is if you notice that, I don't know, 2 or 3 members are voting against a motion, and then it comes time to vote, and those members suddenly are in favor and they never really acknowledged why they switched sides, that can be a sign of canned debate. So score that accordingly, and make note of that. That's not to say that a member can't change sides, but when we see everybody speaking against a motion and then it miraculously passes or vice versa, that's something to note. Signaling or any unallowed communication could be grounds for disqualification, so make note of that. They should not be holding up numbers or winking, or any of that is not allowed in the competition. And additionally, writing on the abilities cards is not allowed as well. So between the different teams, when you're going through to replenish the paper and pencil, make sure that you look at the ability card and that the assigned abilities at the correct station, and that there has been no marking. And if there has been marking, come find one of us and we'll replenish it with a fresh, clean copy. So at the end here, thank you so much for your time and volunteering with us and watching this quick tutorial video. There will be many more specific details about the setup of the competition at our in-person orientation right before you all judge and meet these awesome FFA members. You're welcome to contact me at any time with questions before the event. My email is listed here on the screen, and I'm looking forward to seeing each of you soon. It's sure to be a fun and challenging event. For those of us that have never judged before, you are in for a real treat. And for those of us who are returning, I thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us. And I look forward to seeing you very soon. Take care.